Hey, everybody. My guest is a Grammy-nominated producer, engineer, mixer, and songwriter. He is best known for his work as Bon Iver's producer and engineer on the groundbreaking albums I and 22 A Million, and has engineered and produced for a number of artists, including James Blake, Sean Carey, Gordi, and Bruce Hornsby, among others. Additionally, he has extensive experience as a live music engineer, having worked with many major artists, including Lady Gaga, Madonna, Eminem, and Arcade Fire, again, to name a few. He currently serves as a creative director for Bon Iver's live show, in addition to his continued work with the band in the studio. Would you please join me in welcoming Chris Messina. Hey, man.
Just like I wrote it.
So, it's good to see you back at OU again.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know, 15 years or something like that,
Yeah.
probably. Hi, everybody.
So,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we were just talking back there. 06, I think, was the last time we had connected here.
Yeah, probably at a Southeast Engine show at the Union or something.
Yeah, it's great. So, so let's start from there. So you're here at OU having a dandy time. And then what happens from there? Where's the trajectory from OU and outwards to your first kind of gig?
Yeah, so I was a pretty late enrollee here and ended up in the theater production program because in my eyes it was kind of the closest thing to live production that was offered here at the time, and quickly found out that it was not the right fit for me in what I wanted to do, or this schooling was probably not the right fit for me to begin with. But so after doing a year here, sometime I think in that year while I was here, I started working with Eighth Day Sound. It's a company based in Cleveland, like the second largest sound company in the world. They're now owned by Clair Brothers. And I started working there as an intern, and I left here for summer break in June and never came back. I started out on tour, and that was it.
You just took off and you were like, this is for me.
Yeah, I mean, my first tour was Tom Jones and Tower of Power. It took me all over the place, and then I was out with 311 and kind of had to make the decision whether I was going to come back here and try and make a program for myself, because everything that you've done here didn't exist yet, it seems like.
Go on.
Yeah, right. My best friend Brian, who's here with me, we both went here and we've just been talking about how crucial this stuff is, and if it had it been here when we were here, it would have just been a totally different deal. Yeah, so that's huge. You guys are all very lucky. But yeah, so I just went out on tour as a live sound guy and started kind of for maybe 5 or 10 years, like in 11 months on the road with everybody you can think of gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us maybe one notable moment from there where you were like, I don't know, a learning moment, something that where it really clicked for you on the road and that artist that it was really working for you.
Well, at Eighth Day, they were always kind of neck and neck with Clair Brothers. Clair Brothers have been around a lot longer, so they had a lot of the bigger clients. But in the time that I was there was kind of this batch of people that had all come in at the same time and were becoming this sort of young A-level crew, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that. And Eighth Day stole the Madonna account from Clair Brothers in like 2006, I think, was the first tour they did. And that felt like a shift for the company. And then when I did the Madonna tour in 2008-09, that was like I'm here. And I had done big stuff to that point as well. They don't really do small tours. But that was the first oh, wow. Stadiums worldwide. It was a year and a half or something like that. So that was the big okay, I'm really doing this. And then from there it was kind of strictly stadiums for me and huge pop and hip hop stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you were with Lil Wayne for a while, right?
I was with Lil Wayne for a long time. I did tons of Eminem and Jay-Z stuff, but was always kind of angling to get into whatever indie artist we were working with at the time, because that's just where my personal taste was. And I think Arcade Fire was kind of the first bit of that I got to do. I didn't have a particularly great time, but that's a different story. But shortly after that, I started working with Bon Iver and as a live guy.
Yeah, so how did that relationship form?
I toured with The Fray early on in my career, maybe 2007 or 8 maybe, and their monitor guy at the time was named Brian Joseph, and he ended up as the front of house guy for Bon Iver around that same time, kind of right after Forever came out. Mm-hmm. And just before the self-titled Bon record came out.
That was a big era. I mean, that was like the...
That was it, yeah,
ship.
that was the whole thing. Yeah, it was, just before that record came out, they were getting ready to set up the album cycle, and were finally at a point where they could carry production and do it for real. So he called me because I was still working with Eighth Day. We did The Fray together, blah, 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 and there was a series of events that allowed me to do that tour because, you know, it was a small enough tour that it was kind of below where I was at in my career. Mm-hmm. The company couldn't send me out on that kind of fun stuff because they needed me to go do the big stuff. Yeah. But so I was supposed to go do Lil Wayne at the time, and it turned out that Beyonce got pregnant, had to cancel her tour. All of the people that were on that tour became available, so now guys were able to cover for me on Lil Wayne, and Tom Arco, the owner of Eighth Day, who just really let me shine, but he was just like, listen, if you really want to go do this thing, you can. Yeah. You know, you've done all the garbage stuff thus far. You can go do something you want, and you know, I was able to, and that was it. I think I did maybe one other non-Bon Iver Eighth Day gig from then on, and that was 2011, I think.
So is that basically that relationship really just started forming on the road from that point forward?
Yeah.
Justin?
Yeah. It was a very small, tight-knit crew, and pretty much everyone on the crew had never worked at that level before, except for Brian, who was now doing front of house. He had done a little bit of that with The Fray, and then me, and it was kind of like I quickly realized I was going to be doing a lot more than just being the audio tech. I ended up in sort of a stage manager-y role and just kind of showing everybody, you know, oh, it can be done this way. This is how you tour at this level, basically. And Justin and I hit it off as just friends right away, and he also saw that there was something more in me than what I was doing. And we finished a tour, and I had to go this was the only other gig I did. I had to go do a Beyonce gig in New York, and he called me while I was at that gig, and was just like, listen, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this worth your while. He's like, we don't have the money to do it yet or to take care of you properly or anything like that. He's like, but I think you should come run my studio, and if you're interested in that. And it just kind of worked out that my lease in Brooklyn was up, and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, trusted me enough to take this crazy leap, and we moved from Brooklyn to Eau Claire, Wisconsin in the fall of 2011, and we were there for almost 10 years.
Man, so I want to hit on that for a second, but I want to hit on something else really quick.
Yeah.
So I talk with my students about this all the time, and I think it's just a truism in the music industry, and probably most industries, but can I just drill down to, like, the importance of being a good hang? Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, just being cool, like, not cool, but, like, being good, comfortable to be around, being pleasant.
I mean, we've worked with a number of people who are strictly in the room because they're the vibe tech. You know, they're just...
I'm totally stealing that. That's so good.
It's huge. I mean, strictly is maybe a little much. We're not just, like, paying dudes to kick it around and never do stuff. But pretty close. There's somebody that you kind of keep on the team that's like, when everything is going wrong or you just having a cruddy day, is the guy that's going to kind of get you back on track, at least for a little while. I'm not necessarily always that guy. I probably have more cruddy days than a lot of people in that zone, just because I'm generally dealing with more than what's happening in the room. Yep. So I'm not always that guy, but yeah, it's huge. Yeah. The good hang is crucial.
So you hit it off personally. You demonstrated your skill technically. Unpack the first impression you had of going. Was it April Base?
April Base.
April Base, yeah. So at April
X-Files.
Base, yeah. Oh, I didn't even pick up on that reference.
Yeah, a lot of X-Files references. Northern Exposure and X-Files run deep in this camp. Yeah, so I was telling Brian last night, Eau Claire, Wisconsin and Athens are not dissimilar. Not having been here in a long time, there are a lot of similarities. It's just a college town. This is bigger and there's more happening, but similar vibe. So we kind of roll in from Brooklyn. My wife had actually never seen, she never even went there to see the apartment. I'd only been there for 3 days to find the apartment. So it was a culture shock for sure. But I got to the studio, and at that point, studio is huge quotes. It was a house that was built in the 70s that he and his brother had bought. And the basement, there was a indoor swimming pool that they had kind of shoddily covered the floor, or covered the pool. And there was like a rec room next to it that had a window looking into the pool zone, and that was the studio.
How deep is this pool?
It was actually really deep for an indoor pool in Wisconsin. Wow. It was like 12 feet deep at its deepest. It's nuts. But I walk into the control room, and it's like a dining room table with a G4 and one 1073 or two 1073s and an LA2A, kind of. And I'm like, okay. Took like a huge pay cut to go do this. Yeah. I'm like, this is gonna be awesome. This is my chance. So it was stunning, I guess is a good way to put it. But Justin said, you have to make this a studio. That's why you're here. I know it's nothing now, but like this is where we made the record. It works, but I'm giving you the keys to the castle to make this something.
What an opportunity to basically build your own creative space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was awesome. And it still is. We're like kind of in version 4 or something now. And this is going to be the final one. We did a full tear down and are rebuilding the place from the ground up. So that's been a whole other process. But yeah, it was shocking.
Yeah. So just timeline then. This is after the second record.
Yep.
You head in there. How much before 22 A Million is this happening?
So this is like 2011.
Okay.
So 22 Million came out in 2016. We didn't really realize we were making that record until maybe 2014 sometime. But we had actively been doing stuff. We also, in that window, I think we did the Staves record in that window. We did a Blind Boys of Alabama record, Shouting Matches record. We cranked out a Volcano Choir record in that time. So there was a lot happening in addition to improving the studio, and we were building a second studio as well. But we were doing these kind of long jam sort of writing sessions where just kind of a bunch of people would come over, we'd set up a ton of stuff, and we would just track for like 5 hours. And then Justin and BJ Burton and myself would kind of comb through that stuff at some point and see if there was something. So that kind of went on for a couple of years where Justin was kind of figuring out whether, what this next record was going to be, how and when it was going to happen. And all through this, we were touring. We were still kind of in the album cycle at the very beginning. We just never really stopped.
So by hearing you right, like you're basically juggling 3 roles at that point, like producing the live show, working on whatever this record's becoming, but then also building a studio, building the airplane essentially as it's flying. Is that accurate?
Basically, yeah. We were working in one. We ended up having 2 studios there. We were working in one while we were building the other, and then we were working in both at a long time. And then Justin and I would go on the road and do that whole thing pretty much for up until maybe only the last couple years. If Justin was somewhere, I was there. In one role or another, whether that was carrying his pedal board or, we were doing a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of hats.
So we'll talk a little bit about process, but just out of the gate, like I was trying to think of an analog, just like a comparison for Justin, what I've read about his process, in terms of like pulling ideas across, just like fragments, recordings, bringing in, collaborators, and it's like equal parts, like, I don't know, back to like maybe like a Brian Wilson in the era of like cutting and then like rearranging to almost like a Kanye West in terms of like how you reappropriate digital assets in the modern era. But like, so working with somebody like that, what was that like, you know, coming from a kind of straightforward process of like live shows, like everything is Blind Boys of Alabama. It's like performance in the room, capture, done. I mean, you're mixing, then you're done. So how do you readjust your mindset and your workflow with somebody that's a completely different type way of working?
I think your reference to the Blind Boys thing, like that was way out of character for us. Pretty much everything else that we do, we operate that same way. As far as sort of building the airplane while you're flying it, like you said, that's a really great example. The Blind Boys was the most straight ahead thing that we'd ever done. And it was actually kind of funny because I think they wanted it to be way weirder, or at least their management did. But Justin was like, I want to make a Blind Boys of Alabama record. He's a big fan.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting road to navigate. But, you know, I don't think we really have to adjust a lot. We just kind of, I think we often chase just whatever's feeling okay in that at that moment. It's you just got to kind of follow it, and that's maybe harder to do when you're looking for the 45 seconds of, like I said, a 5-hour thing that you liked or that you can envision becoming a song or something.
Yeah. So walk us through then that getting out of the touring cycle and into the making of 22 Million. Like, when did you begin realizing like something was starting to synthesize where you could hear, okay, these songs, there are songs here, like things are coming together? Or maybe Justin had that realization, or the team.
Justin maybe had it before. You know, BJ especially can walk into a room with someone and do 3 songs in a day, no problem. More than that, he has no problems cranking out a song from seemingly nothing. He's an incredible talent that way. But we would do that, and it's like, okay, we did 3 of these things that are working, but Justin was the only person that knew that this one was going to be on a record. We all have a say in that process, but ultimately he makes that decision. And there are tons of there are things that we've worked on from that period that still haven't come out that are some of my favorite things that we've ever done. Still, and I'm just like hoping they'll see the light of day one day, but maybe they won't, and that's fine. So it was probably around that maybe 2014 time where the bigger picture of the record started to come into focus, not just song-wise, but the aesthetic of the artwork. We started naming the ideas only as numbers pretty early on, which became that whole thing for that record. And that kind of started out as a joke, and then at some point transitioned to like, oh, this is going to be like a numerology thing. There's going to be a lot happening within these symbols and numbers and stuff. So yeah, probably about 2 years before it came out, I think it all started to come together.
Yeah. So I guess just starting from a technical standpoint, actually, just quickly, would you mind breaking down like who's the team that is the primary and everybody's function around?
Yeah. So for 22 Million, it was me, BJ Burton, and Justin for almost that entire time. From, like I said, 2012 to 2016 when the record came out. We were the guys that were there every day. Zach Hansen, who I work with a lot and has continued to work with Bon, he came in as the finisher to kind of do a more professional mix on the record, mainly because BJ had to move on to some other stuff. Justin and I had to hit the road, and we're like trying to get this record out, and Zach came in and finished it. Ryan Olson was another person that kind of came in towards the end he has a long relationship with Justin as friends, and he's able to kind of, for whatever reason, light Justin up in a way that the rest of us can't. So he kind of came in at the end to kick him in the ass and say, let's finish this thing.
Yeah.
So those are, aside from that, the roles are all very fluid.
Yep.
Everybody's at Pro Tools, everybody's moving this around, everybody's ideas are being heard. I would lean more to the technical stuff just because I was in the studio every day. I built the place, so if something interesting needed to happen, then I'm maybe the boots on the ground there.
Yep.
BJ's a lot more in the editing and the arrangement situation, as well as crafting a new loop or something for Justin to kind of start to vibe on. And then Justin will sit down there and really do like the big chops and move this over here, and I want it to be like this. And but it's pretty much all things go.
Yeah. So reading about the making of that record, though, one of the things I want you to touch on is, the digital certainly is a part of what's going on, but you all relied really heavily on, the term I've heard emerge is like mangling, really being, kind of consistently and intentionally destructive on analog process specifically before you get in to digital, like whether it's through tape machines, even cassette tapes. Like, where did that come from? And like, give us some examples of how that made itself into specific tracks.
Somewhere along the way, Justin had latched on to just like, I wanted to, not the entire album, but parts of it. He wanted it to feel like a found cassette. I found this thing in the gutter while I was walking down the street, and it's a record I've never heard before, and I want to hear that. So it's kind of screwed up, but sounds cool, or sounds mostly fine. And we kind of took that and did it literally. I think we took a Neil Young cassette and cracked it open and beat it up and stepped on it in the dirt outside, and then tracked stuff to that, or would bounce a mix to it, and then that would go back into Pro Tools. And we have a number of cassette decks that have like different vari-speed styles on them, and we would do a lot of that stuff, just the tiniest bit to, just 29 Stratford Apartments is a song on that record that we did a lot of that on. There was a lot of weird vari-speed stuff happening. And then it went to more traditional tape machines, Ampex 2 tracks that we would just beat up on the way in, and
like just overdriving the
as hard as you can go. Yeah, just this is wrong. Someone would be mad at us in the old days, but we would do that very intentionally, and then back into Pro Tools.
So can you identify and maybe use a specific song as a case study of process on that record, kind of walking us from start to finish, and maybe how it came out of a jam or a loop got set up, one that sticks out to you?
10, Death Breast on that record, which is the second song on that record, I think.
So the really distorted drums.
Yeah, it's insane sounding song. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the band live, but it's even more insane live. It's a punishing experience. But that one came out of Justin. It's Justin playing drums, and BJ had this like 16-track half-inch Fostex tape machine. So it's 16 tracks on a half-inch, which is wild. I think it's half-inch, which is a lot. But Justin was playing drums, and it's going into this tape machine, and the one of the mics had like fallen onto the kick drum, and the live room at that time was on the other side of the house, and it was just like, oh, I'm not going to go fix it. I don't even actually remember if I was there this night that this happened, but that's what that sound became. And then we ended up pitch shifting that and then sending that to what is known as the Messina now, which is just an eventide harmonizer. And then being able to play that on keys to create what is that crazy loop in the background. So that's a good example of just wildness. And then the vocals got that same harmonizer treatment on that song, and that went from there.
So you throw everything in, you kind of destroy it, and then you give that to Justin, and then he builds off of that. And then you kind of construct the track accordingly?
Yeah. Normally vocals and lyrics and everything are the last step, like last step for us. He'll be working on them. We'll all be working on them kind of as we go, but that's really the finish for us. But yeah, he'll get in there and chop up whatever he wants and cut a bar here and blah blah blah. Yeah. He's fully comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I love that. I think about a lot of student engineers I know that are starting out, and I know from my experience, you kind of go through the stage where you're like, is this okay? Or like you read articles and you're like, oh, that's how you're supposed to do it. Like there's some standard, but like to have the permission to just intentionally break rules and realize that there's no rules. It's just what do you feel, and that's really all that it comes down to.
Yeah. Justin Justin gives everyone the freedom to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Structure-wise, instrumentation, whatever, and BJ is really great at thinking outside the realm of traditional music. So to have that, that freedom to just anything goes is totally fine.
Yeah.
You do, but all of us, myself probably more than everyone else, thinks about that's not how you do that. This has to go here, and there's a balance to that. Some of the stuff that we've achieved has been because we did it right and wrong at the same time. So that's the beauty of the team that we have.
Yeah. So, like, going through kind of, I don't want to say it's purely uncharted territory, but certainly in terms of workflow, certainly maybe your experience at that point, what were some of the kind of the essential skill sets that you nicked along the way, that you picked up things through your live experience or previous that came in really handy when there wasn't a clear roadmap? You're like, oh, but I have these kind of things that I know can really apply to this.
Well, signal flow, just literally basic signal flow, which is when a lot of people are hyped up on something, is the first thing to fly out the window. So someone has to kind of be keeping an eye on that so that you can keep the energy up and keep doing stuff.
For the layperson in the room, just quickly.
Just how to get the mic into the machine. That's really it. It's whatever you're trying to record, how to keep that going as seamlessly as possible. And to that same thing is reliability. But my friend John Vanderslice said to me once that the best chain that you can have in the studio is the one that works all the time. And it doesn't matter that it's not the fanciest thing or the one that everybody talks about. If it works and it's not going to screw up the performance, and you're not going to waste time and miss the moment. Which again, I am absolutely victim of, or guilty of doing that. Going, no, let me give me just one more minute, and then I'll get it, and it's past. But that's a piece of advice that always pops up in my head.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say those two things are huge, and for those early days of working with the band, for the first few years, absolutely no one was going to work harder than me. That was it. I was going to be there the latest. I was going to be there the earliest. I was going to do everything. I mean, and that came off in a number of ways, not just in the studio, just in my trajectory with the band. I've done everything from, like I said, carry Justin's bag to sing in the band live to production manage and everything in between and all the way back down. Luckily, I don't have to work that hard anymore because I don't think I could take it.
Yep.
It's a young person's game for sure, but those are the three things for sure.
Yeah, totally agree. There's like a season for that,
Absolutely.
but then you have to readjust.
Yeah.
You can't always go at 100 miles an hour.
It's bad for everybody if you keep trying to do that.
Totally. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I think about that. I've heard this quote. I think it's attributable to Brian Eno that, like, you never wait to capture the moment because who knows why it's sounding the way it does at that time. Don't wait till the next morning. Don't wait, like, it'll just pass. And there's a real mystery there to, like, but yeah, that person that has the dedicated chain and can make it happen, it's like the most important thing, right?
Yeah, I learned a lot of that from BJ too. He was just very good at that. I don't care what mic is closest to him.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And then we do that.
Yeah, and that musicians are the most impatient people, and it will just
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to go back to something you mentioned, and that is the Messina, because you actually created a device that has like your
We'll correct that.
Yeah.
We'll correct that pretty quickly.
So, can we play an example? I think we have a cue of Holyfield that. Do you want to unpack that track? What's going on here?
Sure. Yeah. This is one of my favorite songs that we've done. We did this kind of in one-ish take, as things using the Messina tend to happen. But there's a synthesizer that we bought in Austin at Switched On. Shout out to Switched On.
Yeah.
Great place. Called an Electrocomp EML 101. It's this early semi-modular synthesizer. It's a beautiful thing that is impossibly hard to use. And we had just gotten that because we're like, we saw it on a day off there, and we were like, I think there's something to this. Anyways, we brought it back. Justin, myself, and Brad Cook, who is one of our closest friends and collaborators, an incredible producer in his own right, who's just killing it right now. But it was the three of us, and we were messing around with this thing, with the EML, and Justin kind of got this just only noise happening on it, and we sent that into our SSL console and started doing some keyed gate stuff. Basically, that was the noise was being gated. I forget what it was being triggered by at the moment, but the gate was being opened and closed by another instrument or something else in the music. And then that Brad was playing another synthesizer, just notes all on the same scale. I think it was D maybe. And then Justin was Messina-ing the synthesizer that Brad was playing. So it became this sort of like three-person instrument that was happening in real time that just sounded nuts.
Yeah. Cool. So let's take a listen to this track. This is the beginning of Holyfield. So let's take a listen.
Danger been stepping in. I'm happy as I ever been. Come tell you what the cadence is. It's folded in the evidences. So you wanna leave a mark? You're honing in on Meadow Park. I heard you guys are very safe. I'm caught up with the featherweights. The dawn is rising. The land ain't rising. No. No, no. Flash hope. Past the throat.
There it is.
So, I guess my question is like, when you hear that played back now, what comes back to you from those sessions? What do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, we did that like in a week. It was a beautiful spring in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and at that time, Brad and Justin and I were just kind of thick as thieves, and it was just a great day. We were just goofing around, and that thing happened. Our studio, our control room has like a 9-foot window that looks out into the backyard. That is awesome for doing those kinds of things. But it's just really good, and it was just a really nice time that came very easily once we had the understanding of what this Messina thing can do. A lot of people hear it, and they think of the song 715 Creeks from 22 A Million. That is just Justin singing and playing through this, and it's very inspired by that Image and Heap song, where she did it a totally different way, but it's a similar result. But we Messina all sorts of stuff, and it's basically just you put something in and you can play harmonies of it on a keyboard, whether that's drums or a voice or just anything you want. And that we were kind of in this process still of just like, well, what else can we put in there? Mm-hmm. And trying anything. And this was one of those things that kind of came out of that. And I think Justin sang that same day that we did this. And there's something about working with the machine, the Messina, that seems to help us finish things very quickly. Again, that 715 Creeks, we got it working that day, and Justin sat down, and the first thing he played on it was like the first 3 lines of that song. And it just like came out right away, and we were just like, oh, okay, I guess this is how it's supposed to work. We just knew right away.
Yeah. What an amazing feat to have a verb with your last name.
Yeah, it was not my own doing. Let the record show that Justin dubbed it the Messina, but I suppose probably now is a good time to clear up what it is. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not. We didn't make our own box. It's not our own software. It's nothing. It's a bunch of stuff that we put together that does what Justin wants it to do. It's Antares Auto-Tune. an incredible plugin, and it's an Eventide H8000 that's running its own MIDI harmony preset. And by combining those two things in a number of incorrect ways, they do that, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for
mystery gone.
unpacking the mystery.
No trademarks.
Well, it's probably a good segue then to get into the next album. So with
Yep.
II, like, when I think about, that kind of mangled sound, this seems like maybe the middle ground between that and then the precursors that came before. Kind of, maybe not in every case, but, more some traditional song structures coming back, definitely like not as found footage, maybe, but finding kind of elements from all of those. So what did you take moving into that in terms of mindset and practice as you approached a new project?
Yeah, a lot of the ethos for II was collaboration. There were a lot more people involved more extensively. It's always been a collaborative project. There were a ton of people involved in 22 Million, but there was a core group of us that were still, like I said, doing the day-to-day. That core group expanded for II to the point that when we were finishing the record at Sonic Ranch in Texas, at one point I think there were like 40 of us there doing it. We took over the entire place. We were working in every studio. We had, our visual team there. We had the dancers that we were working with at the time for another production. They came down for a couple days and were just like dancing in the woods while people took pictures of them. So it was a totally different thing. In retrospect, we will never do it like that again, ever again. It was insane. But you're right. Some more traditional sounding or looking songs appeared. I think a lot of that was Brad Cook's influence on Justin and the direction of where we should go. It just kind of became a happy mix of the previous three records, and which worked, I think, for the most part on that record. We emphasized Justin's voice maybe a little more than we had on the previous record, just not screwing it up as much. And lyrically, he had maybe the lyrics were maybe a little more approachable than the previous records, a little less cryptic. That became noticeable pretty early on. Lyrics were a bigger focus earlier on in this record, for sure.
So, but not all the songs came easy to him. I mean,
No.
So, there's kind of two things I want to unpack that I've read about, and that is that really with Eau Claire in Texas, with Sonic Ranch, that location really does play a part in what you're hearing on the albums. Like there's a direct influence in terms of landscape, even the feel of each of those locations.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then, again, it was really the team in some of those cases that helped him to get across the finish line with some of those songs. So can you pull maybe a song from that album in particular and walk us through a story with that?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best examples are IMI, or I think it's called IMI. It was called a lot of things, which was technically the first song on the record. It's after the little intro thing. That is a song that was from the 22 Million era, and we had been working on that song for like 7 years or something before it came out, and we just could never crack it. And even now I listen to it, and it's insane. We're just kind of like, is this a song? This is a song, right?
So you just got files on a hard drive that just carry through the years, and you're like, are you
Yeah.
revisiting it like intentionally, or you're like, let's pull up and see what's there, or is it just kind of like ruminating?
It'll be in there. That was
Yeah.
one that if it had been done, it would have been on 22 Million if we had all felt good about it. Same with Faith. Faith was another one that ended up on II that was around that time, that was in the running to be on 22 Million. But yeah, we just have hard drives full of stuff. Everything, pretty much everything he's ever done post 2010, maybe.
So is he just retaining all that mentally in terms of like, I want to come back to this song or
Pretty
that
much.
idea?
We'll all kind of remember something, or there's once you kind of get wind that we're starting to talk about trying to make music again, new music. It's like, oh, what about whatever happened with this?
Yeah.
Where's that little thing? And it can literally, like we said, literally it'll be a, an iPhone recording from the back of the bus of somebody goofing around. Oh, where did that go? It never ended up anywhere.
Yeah.
But IMI is a really good example of one that needed that collaborative help from someone outside of our immediate circle, a guy named Andrew Sarlo, who's, again, fantastic producer in his own right. He's done a lot of the new Big Thief stuff, which is just
so good.
So good.
They work on the newest album?
Not the newest one. I'm sure he was involved to some degree, but the previous one he was heavily involved in. He's a great guy, very talented. But he just came down for a night to Sonic Ranch, and we were just kind of, he's like, well, what do you guys want me to do? And we were like, here, have the hardest thing that we've all been working on for 8 years. See if you can do something with it.
And is it all just in pieces? Is it linear? Like what?
There was there was a version where there were hundreds of versions before.
Yeah.
There was whatever version we were sort of working on at that time of like, here, this is what we think it could be.
Yeah.
And he spent the night with it and moved this around and chopped that and muted this and muted that. And Justin, Brad, and I went over to hear it because he was working in his own separate little studio, and we were on the other side of the property. And we went over there at night, and we heard it, and we were just like, holy, this is it. It's close. Or it just cracked it open. We heard what he did was not exactly how the song ended up, but he reapproached it in enough of a way that we could see into the song in a different way. And it showed us where we were headed. And then we were able to finish it. And I really don't think that would have happened without someone else's involvement.
So was it mostly an editorial? Was it like just mostly like subtractive and just rearranging, muting?
Yeah. There were some really wild structure things in that song, arrangement things, and half bars and just stuff that had happened over the years that we had all just gotten used to because we'd heard it for 7 years like that. But Sarlo coming in and just being like, why is it like this? Why didn't you guys do this? Or these drums are stupid. These don't sound cool. And we're like, yeah, but they did in like 2013. And, he had it was just fresh eyes, fresh ears, and someone that we trusted enough to listen to. I'm sure there are a lot of people that could have been like, this sucks. And we'd be like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And, I think each of us actually, even with the core group, probably at one point with that song, we're like, trash it.
Yeah.
This thing's toast.
Yeah.
And we were also wrong.
Yeah. So how important is that, just have somebody that you trust enough to be honest, somewhere around the crew or in the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's honesty, it's you get so deep in the weeds on some of this stuff that you don't even see what you're doing anymore. And that's something that Justin and I have been reckoning with over the last few years, too, of just like, we're too close. We're too close to this. We don't need to go in there every day for 8 hours a day and work on a snare sound that doesn't matter, We are learning to zoom out and to turn off and to go do other stuff and not worry about this stuff as much. And that's a luxury that comes with our setup with the studio and the way we're able to work. We certainly acknowledge that. But we are really trying to take more advantage of that.
Yeah. So, for you, I feel like you're in probably one of the best positions to watch how art impacts audience. Because most of the time it's like somebody's in the studio for 8 hours, 12 hours a day or whatever, and you might be doing that for a series of weeks and months, but maybe you get to see the show once on tour, you kind of dip in, and maybe you get a sense in the studio this chorus is going to take off once we put it on the road. But I think it's really cool that you get to be in the iterative and creative and finalization process. Then you get to help take the full thing on the road and then see how it impacts audiences, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of, I don't really want to work any other way anymore. If other people, if I don't get to have a say in the whole thing, I kind of feel weird about I'm leaving it unfinished. So other people that I work with, which the list is not huge, they allow me that input, but nothing like with Bon Iver where a number of occasions see the song the first time it's played, and the last, for a number of years. I see that whole thing, and I get to have input the whole way, and not just as a friend that says like, hey, you should play it like this. Like I have input that matters, and we just did last week we started a tour, and I go down there for the rehearsal day and the first show, and we had just done 2 weeks of rehearsal in Arizona in like January, gearing up for the year, and those are much more akin to like a theatrical rehearsal than band practice. Not in that we're saying you got to talk here, make sure you say something. This is how you guys come onto the stage. This is when we play the intro. That stuff takes 5 minutes, but it's the minutia of how you guys are playing these songs, sound choices live. Again, we're afforded that luxury of just spending that time 2 straight weeks in a theater all day, and I'm out front with our front of house guy, and I'm in constant contact with the band, and I've in some cases heavily designed or had a lot of influence on the design of their setups, what they're playing on, the instruments that they're using, the way that they're interconnected to each other on stage. Having that understanding of what's going on stage means that I can be out front with our front of house guy. Justin knows that I'm his ears out there, and that I can give feedback to everyone that is more in depth than anyone else. Even other people in the band, they can't say, "Oh, you should do this," because they don't know that they can do that in their world. So I'm able to give that kind of feedback, and it's maybe my second favorite part of what I do is rehearsal time.
Yeah. So are you all working on a new album right now? Like, what's going on creatively, studio-wise?
Not really. We're always working on stuff. There's no formal plans for a record or anything like that at this time. We're in such a great position with Jaguar, our label, that we get to do what we want. There's no pressure from them to get a record going or anything. We're really focusing on getting the band playing the best that they've ever played right now. We've had kind of the same group of people for a minute. The pandemic kind of cut our last record cycle short. I think we only did 16 shows on that album cycle. And we're not really treating the current tours as that album cycle, really, per se. So we're just really trying to put together the best live performance that we can from a music standpoint, and get our studio finished, the new build totally finished, so that we can start tinkering around in there. And I think once we get that place up to speed, we'll start digging in on stuff. It's going to come because it's going to be fun. We're going to be very excited.
So we have some time for questions.
All day long.
Go up to the microphone.
Everything else is canceled. It's just me for the rest of the day. Looks like you're up.
Hi, thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
When I saw
What's your name?
My name's Jonah. I'm
Hey, Jonah.
recording industry student here.
Awesome.
Josh is my professor.
This guy.
So, when I saw Bon Iver live, I was like very impressed at how you guys were able to replicate this recordings in a live setting. So how do you go about like replicating like the weird sounds that you were talking about with like Death Breath in a live setting?
So we don't play with any tracks live. The closest thing to a track is a drum loop of some kind that one of the drummers are triggering. And Death Breath is an example of that. The main loop is triggered by Matt, one of our drummers. And that's just being played off of, well, it used to be an SPDS, now it's an MPC or a 2-box or something. But as we're going through the rehearsals, we kind of decide what are the crucial things that we can't approximate. And those are the things that end up as direct samples or loops. And then everything else, we really just spend the time and say, okay, you need to be in this area. You need to be in this vein of a sound, and let the band do their thing. And even with direct samples, we're manipulating those so that they sound you recognize them from the record, but that you're getting a new experience.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, I'm Remington.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. So I was wondering, did you work on the Big Red Machine records?
More so the first one than the second one. I'm sure I touched on something with the second one, but yeah, the first one I was more heavily involved in.
Well, I was just wondering, like, how could you speak to like how that, like the creative differences there, like when you're working with like Aaron Dessner as well as Justin Vernon, and how that pans out?
Yeah, I mean that's Aaron's project all the way. On that first one, Justin, Brad Cook again, Aaron, and Aaron's engineer John Lowe. We were working heavily together on that, but Aaron was sending us ideas. It was his departure from the National in a way for kind of the first time. He'd done other people's records, but he had just this sort of pile of loops and little piano things that we started to mess around with, and we would go up to Aaron's studio or he would come to ours, and we would just kind of goof around for a couple days. And Justin kind of defaulted to being the singer and has since decided that that's not really what he wants his role to be in that band. He wants to be a singer or a voice, but in sort of the collaborative spirit of what we've been doing a lot more lately, he wants it to be this sort of undefined voice for the band. But that is for sure, especially the second record, that's for sure Aaron's thing. He's taken the lead on all that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. So I hear a lot of influence, especially on the II record, from producers like Eno. I think that everything in modern alternative music is derivative of Eno these days. I was just wondering, what are some of your other big influences when it comes to either musicianship or production or even mixing?
Yeah, we're huge Brian Eno, Daniel Lanois guys. I mean, who isn't? They're just the best. What else? I don't know. That's always a wild question. Maybe I'll find you somewhere later and we can talk about it more at length when they come to mind. But you know, we're definitely in that vein. The amount of times that we listen to "Wrecking Ball" by Emmylou Harris. What's the song? What's like the second song on that record? "Where Will I Be?" That's one that we just always put on, and whether it sounds anything like what we're working on, that just has the right vibe for what we're trying to do, regardless of how it sounds. But yeah, those guys just always get it right, for sure. I'll think of something, I'll come back to you.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
That song has a crazy bass line.
Crazy bass line. I think that's Daniel playing.
Yeah.
And two drummers. One of, what's his name? Brian Blade, and who's the dude from U2?
Larry Mullen.
Larry Mullen, Jr.
Junior.
Yeah, pan left, right. What's up? Oh, let's go over here, actually. We'll take one over here.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Holloway Williams.
Hey.
I was wondering any advice that you would have for maintaining a partnership with other musicians for like a long period of time. You've been together for 10 plus years.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, figuring it out as I go too. We have a wild relationship, Justin and I, that is mostly positive, and we're very lucky that that's the vibe. You know, I'm not an artist in that I'm not trying to get my name out there and be the face of anything, he says from a stage. But that's not my goal, and I think that is different than maybe what you're talking about. But I don't know. But the thing that helps is that I recognize that I'm in service to his goal. That's what I'm here for. I get to put my stamp on it and give influence and try whatever I want to try. He's very, like I said, he's very flexible in that regard. But we work together because I'm never going into business for myself, I guess is a good way to put it. Yeah. And I think if you want to have that kind of relationship with someone, that's how it's got to be. I'm not sure there's really room a lot of the time for two stars.
Yeah.
But, you know, my role has shifted so much over the last 10 or 11 years that we're constantly figuring it out. And whether that's him wanting to work with other people and me just kind of having to like accept that and be excited about it or be hurt by it or whatever, like that,
Yeah.
that's artist stuff, you know, you feel that.
Yeah.
Which I think is totally natural, and I'm saying that like being able to zoom out on myself now. Had you asked me, you know, when it was happening, I was like, this is it, it's over,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
But, you know, you just try to do your thing and serve the project. That's kind of the best I can do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
This will need to be our last question. So.
All right, I'll try and, I'm too loud. I'll try and make it brief. I'm a huge fan of the record. 22 Million has been like
Thanks.
a favorite record of mine for such a long time. Something that I always really admired about that record was a lot of the really interesting vocal production. You talked about Creeks and Stratford Apartments, and I was just curious, you know, you mentioned like the ELM 101, and like that's like a $7,000 synth, and like even like the H9000 is like $500, something like that. I was curious, for someone looking to try and pursue that kind of sound or like a real interesting textured harmony, is there a way to do that without spending all kinds of money on these super expensive pieces of equipment?
Probably, yeah. I mean, yeah.
You mentioned Antares too, and I know Antares has that harmony engine.
You know, before I started working with Justin, you know, all of from the Blood Bank EP, Woods, that's all harmony engine and like a Line 6 DL4, I think. And for years we did that with a Helicon and a Line 6 DL4 live. You know, you're talking about.
Okay.
You're only going to get so cheap. We're talking about insane technology that, you know, people are like, can I get this for less than free, possibly? But, you know, I'm sure in Ableton and stuff, there's ways to do that. You know, with auto-tune and everything being so prevalent, and even the harmony, different types of harmony engines now, it's become such a standard of modern music that people are making it more and more and more affordable and easily accessible. My advice to you would be to not chase any of that sound because it's probably already done. And you could maybe put your own spin on it, but I'm not sure how fresh it's going to sound anymore. And we debate that, I think, internally all the time, too. Like, is this cool anymore? Do we know what we're doing? But, you know, my advice to you would be take what you have and make something cool with that. Because I probably don't have that or have the same pile of stuff laying in front of me or have the brain that you're going to use to come up with it. So I know everybody says, like, obviously cool toys are fun. It's fun to have the fun stuff, but it's not necessary. If you just go sing in a parking garage, it'll sound cooler. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Find a parking garage and call it the Messina. We'll just like.
That's
circuit it
yeah.
all.
Maybe that's, you know, since I didn't get the honorary degree I was expecting today, maybe we could just do a parking garage. We'll just name one after me. The Messina
Done.
Surface Lot. How about that?
Great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so
and
much, Josh.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks all of you. Appreciate it.